Hey folks, Scott Walters here. Welcome back to the Bulletproof Garage and another episode of Project Brutus. What I have here is a 1988 7.3 IDI diesel engine, and in this episode we are going to be working on the cylinder heads. Now this is the engine that I yanked out of that 1988 F350 way back in episode 5. As you may recall, it's a really low mile engine, so I'm not expecting a lot of surprises. Now we're going to focus on one thing and one thing only in this episode: the cylinder heads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the cylinder heads, and then I'm going to check to see if they're straight. Then I'm going to check them for cracks using a dye penetrant method and a magnetic particle inspection method, or Magnaflux. And then we're going to check the valves and the valve guides. All right. Now, as you may recall, I have another set of heads in the garage, and those came off of that 1994 7.3 IDI turbo diesel engine. So between this set of heads and that set of heads, hopefully we have one set that's good and that we can use for our build. All right, folks, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride here in the Bulletproof Garage. Okay, folks, first step, remove the rocker arms. Okay folks, there is a procedure to remove the head bolts, all right? So what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to remove them after untorquing the bolts in the reverse procedure that you use to torque them down, all right? So I have got a cheat sheet here that shows me the sequence to go through, and so I'm just going to go through and start them off with just maybe 1/8 of a turn, all right? And then go through the sequence from there. So there's 17 different bolts. So we start off right here. (17, 16). All right, let's get the cylinder head off and on the bench. Okay folks, now to check the bore, hoping for 4.110, because that is standard bore on a 7.3 IDI, and I'm thinking that it is standard. Yep, 4.110, perfect. Now let's check for a ridge. Oh man, good to go there. All right folks, let me show you what I'm checking here. All right, folks, let's talk about cylinder wear and the cylinder ridge, okay? So as y'all know, the piston comes all the way up in the bore, usually stops just a few thousand shy of the deck right here, okay? but the piston rings do not. All right, the piston rings are going to be, you know, maybe a 1/4 inch down the piston. So where they stop, I can tell right here. All right, you see that line? That's where the top ring stopped. All right, and over time, understand that, you know, as the piston moves up and down in the cylinder, it's really the rings that are riding on the cylinder. All right, and the rings over time will wear out the cylinder. On a worn out car and a worn out engine, when you pop the cylinder heads off, first thing I like to do is just run my fingernail over that area right there to see if you feel anything. And if the engine is worn out, it's going to need to be bored out. That ridge is going to be really obvious. You'll catch your fingernail on it. On this one, nothing. I can't even feel it, all right? I can see it, but I can't feel it, and that is awesome. So this engine should be good to go at standard bore with just a honing to break the glaze. Okay folks, let's get these cylinder heads disassembled. My valve spring compressor is made in the USA. It's a Lang 383 Alpha, and I got this for about 60 bucks from Summit Racing. Good piece of gear. Process is pretty simple. All right, now it is important to keep the valves in the right spot, all right? So what I've done here is I'm disassembling the driver's side cylinder head, starting from the front, moving to the rear. And so I'm going to keep the valves together. So I pulled out the intake valve first. So I'm just bagging the valve and the retainer and the locks, so I've got it all together. Because remember, these valves have been wearing in that seat, you know, for thousands and thousands of miles. So when you mix and match the valves, you may end up with valves that aren't sealing very well. So again, keep your valves together. All right, folks, now for one of my least favorite things to do, cleaning up old nasty cylinder heads. If you're going to use wire brushes like I am here, absolutely wear eye protection, even if you've got glasses like me, and recommend you wear gloves too. All right, let's get after it. Okay folks, time to inspect the cylinder heads for cracks. All right, the process we're going to use first is going to be magnetic particle inspection. It's also called Magnaflux, but Magnaflux is really the brand name. That's not the name of the process, all right? So what I've got here is a Magnaflux. Let's look at this is a model Yankee 1. So this is an older tool that I picked up lightly used. I paid 200 bucks for it. New they're going to run you about 500, but they show up used in good condition periodically. So so you've got this, and I think you call this is the yoke, all right? And what you use this with is magnetic powder. I have red magnetic powder here. And I have a little, I don't know if you call it a shaker, a blower, or something like that, that you fill up with powder and then you shake it over the piece of equipment that you're going to test, all right? So fairly simple process, all right? There is some expense involved. Again, you know, this is gonna run you about 500 bucks new, a few $100 used. But remember, if you take an engine to your machinist and say, I want you to check the crank, the block, and the heads for cracks, assuming that you've got iron block heads and, well, of course your crank is iron, it's going to run you, I don't know, probably a few $100. So if you're going to build one engine and get it Magnaflux, well, you may be able to cover the cost of that by just using it once. All right, well, let's get started. All right, folks, here we go. As mentioned, the cylinder head needs to be really clean for this to work. All right, so this has been wire brushed, it's been through the parts washer, so and it also has to be dry. So I also hit it with some compressed air after I cleaned it up. All right, first thing, just go ahead and sprinkle on your powder. I'm just going to get the entire surface of the cylinder head with a decent coat of this magnetic powder. All right, and this is simple, folks. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your yoke, place it on the cylinder head flat, and just pull the trigger. All right. Uh-oh, I can see a problem already. Son of a gun. Boy, I hate to get bad news like this. All right, there's a crack right here, folks. Right here in this seat. Yeah, and it looks like there's a crack in the seat that extends into the cylinder head. Shoot. All right, now when you're testing these, you want to test in one direction, and then you want to test in another direction, because if the crack is parallel to your yoke, it's not necessarily going to show up. All right, so bad news right from Jump Street. All right. All right, and areas that you really want to focus on for a diesel, you've got to check your pre-cups as well. Now I do have some cracks in the pre-cups. We'll talk about that in a second. And on pretty much any engine, you want to check where your head bolts go through. You want to check the area in between the valves. You want to get down into the bowls, which can be a little tricky, but we'll get there. And again, in the area around the valve seats. So if you can see here and here and here, so the pre-cups all have cracks in them, all right? The pre-cup is this circular area right here. And but they're actually not in bad shape, because it's very common for your pre-cups to be cracked, and as long as they don't pass the fire ring right here, okay, well that's where the edge of the combustion chamber is, all right? As long as they don't extend past that, they're generally said to be okay. All right, so so all the pre-cups on this head are cracked, but they're all minor cracked. They're all minor cracks, so so it's okay in that respect. But again, I've got this crack right here that is, oh man, that is problematic. All right, folks, let's do a close-up on that crack. You can see it right here already. And once I magnetize it, yeah, it just brings the particles into the crack. All right, so you can see the crack here is in the seat on into the cylinder head, and it stops at about this area. So that's bad news. Okay, folks, I'm going to test the bowls on this cylinder head as well. All right, so get some powder down in there. All right, folks, now we're moving on to dye penetrant testing. Now, you will hear this called zyglo, but zyglo, like Magnaflux, is the name of the manufacturer, not the name of the process. The process is dye penetrant testing. This particular kit comes from Magnaflux, and it cost 121 bucks on Amazon. Came with 2 cans of the cleaner, 1 can of the penetrant, and 1 can of the developer. Now, you can use this on aluminum and cast iron. So that's the nice thing about it. You can use it on aluminum. Again, Magnaflux is going to be a little easier, in my opinion, or magnetic particle testing when you've got something that is magnetic. But if you've got things that are aluminum and things that are magnetic, dye penetrant works for both of those. All right, so let's go ahead and get started and compare the results to what we got with the magnetic particle inspection. All right, first step, we're going to start off with the cleaner. All right, and this goes on like brake cleaner. It evaporates very quickly. I can see it evaporating off the surface right now. Obviously, we want to make sure we get the areas that we're going to test clean very well. All right, I'll let that sit for a few minutes, but let's make sure it's completely dry. Okay, folks, step 2, apply the penetrant. Okay, after that's applied, you have to wait for it to dry, a minimum of 10 minutes. Since it's a little cool here today, I'm going to leave it on for 15 minutes. Okay, folks, it's been 15 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe it off. When I say wipe it off, well, you're just wiping off the excess. It's obviously already seeped down into the cracks. Okay, folks, next up is the developer. The developer is going to have some fine particles inside of it that are going to get pulled into the cracks, all right? So you got to make sure you shake it up well, and then you spray it on lightly. Yeah, you can see it goes on almost like paint. Okay, and you have to wait 5 to 15 minutes for it to develop. So again, it's kind of cool outside today, so I'll go ahead and put the timer on for 15 minutes. Okay, folks, I've given it 15 minutes to dry, and there you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cracks clearly visible, and nothing else evident on the cylinder head. Just the pre-cups on each of the cylinders are cracked, all right? So what has happened here is that the developer has pulled some of the red out and also has some contrast against the red to where you can see where the cracks are, all right? So that's dye penetrant 101. Okay, folks, the heads are cleaned. I just pulled this out of the parts washer, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check to see if the surface here is warped. All right, so this is a really simple task. All you need is a good straight edge. This is one, as you can see, is from OEM Tools. I think it set me back about 50 bucks. And then I've got a feeler gauge. This is 2000s, okay? So all you do is basically you line up your straight edge and put a little bit of pressure on it, and then you're trying to slide the feeler gauge underneath, and if you've got less than 2000s, you're going to be good to go, at least on this IDI. So what you want to do is you want to check it in several different places. So I'm going to check here. All right, and you're going to check back here as well. All right, then you're going to want to check diagonally. All right, and let's get that done. And check here diagonally. Okay, folks, this cylinder head is good to go. If it's warped at all, it's less than 2000s, and that's good enough for us. One thing I will mention is that you have to have this surface completely clean. Obviously, if you've got some gasket material on here, you've got any grime or residue, it's going to throw you off. And as you saw earlier in the video, I cleaned this up really well with a wire brush before we checked to see if it was straight or not. Okay? All right, folks, that is it for this episode, all right? Stay tuned for more, though, as we continue the 7.3 IDI turbo build for old Brutus. The next episode is going to be all about cylinder heads yet again. We've got more work to do before we can start assembling them. Okay, and also before I forget, if you enjoyed this video, if you found it informative or helpful, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. Okay, folks, and until next time, you can also find me on social media, on Facebook at The Bulletproof Garage, and on Instagram at the.bulletproof.garage. Thanks, and we'll see you next time on the Bulletproof Garage.